Welcome to In the Green, the podcast based on the intersection between life, finance, and the pursuit of breaking par. I am your host, Ryan Briggs with GFG Wealth Advisors. Time to tee off. Welcome back to the In the Green podcast. We are joined today by Dr. Steffie Tomson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan.
Appreciate you coming.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to introduce you to our audience.
Okay.
Right? They're a lovely group of people, but they might not know who you are, so let's tell them. All right? So what kind of doctor are you? Where'd you go to school? What's your career? Just fill us in. I'm
not the real kind. I'm the fakie. A PhD in neuroscience from Baylor College of Medicine.
Sounds pretty real to me.
In Houston, yep. It was a long time coming. My focus there was on cognitive sciences. So how does our brain kind of perceive our world and how do we think about things? And that's what actually, during my career as a neuroscientist, all this thinking about how we think is what got me into my current business situation right now, in which, as I was going about my business, doing science as a professor, walking around all day, I was thinking all the time about what was on my feet and how uncomfortable my feet were, and at the end of the day, how uncomfortable my back was. And it rolled into planning for the next day, like, okay, wow, I've got these meetings that are far away in the campus, so I need to wear a shoe that will get me there. But I also need to wear a blazer. So the blazer goes with only that shoe, but that's not the shoe that will get me to the place. So now I have to wear a different shoe with a different outfit. It was an absolute nightmare. And every woman that you talk to will understand this narrative like the back of our hand. I mean, it's just daily life for us. But as a neuroscientist, I was thinking, this is insane. It's ridiculous that women have to spend all this time thinking about what's on our feet, when my male colleagues literally just put on a pair of shoes, tie them, and then go to work.
Confirm, yes.
Yes, and then you come back at the end of the day and you're like, well, I guess I'll take my shoes off now. Where women come home at the end of the day and they're like, don't talk to me until I take my shoes off. It's something that was just pervasive. And I thought, there's got to be a better way. There has to be another solution. There are millions of shoes out there that have been produced, maybe billions, I don't know, historically. There's got to be some solution. So I brought some of my favorite heels into my lab at Baylor, and I sliced them in half with a bandsaw lengthwise to see what was inside, to see like what's going on here. And it became very apparent and clear that what's inside every heel is some combination of plastic, metal, screws, nails, very hard materials.
Nothing that gives.
Well, there is a little bit of give. It's at the very top of the shoe, what we call the insole. And there's maybe 2 millimeters of a very kind of open cell squishy foam. And that's what women feel when we take a shoe off of the shelf in the store. We put our fingers there and we squish it. We all know what that feels like. And we all do it. And we say, oh, this is going to be comfortable because it feels squishy. But what we don't think about is the part between the insole and the outsole, which is what the part that could do the vast majority of the shock absorption. But because that piece is made out of plastic and metal, that shock doesn't get absorbed. It goes straight from the tile floor, straight up, reverberates into our ankles and our knees and our hips and our backs. And if you walk 10,000 steps a day on something like that, you're bound to be just debilitated at the end of the day.
Sure.
And that's just one of the many problems with existing footwear. So I think once I really understood the problem a little bit more, like why anatomically we struggle, why physiologically, and why like structurally shoes are really not built for women to be walking around all day, it became a very quite simple solution. I still don't really understand why no one had done it before I had done it, except that it's very expensive, and that's something I'm sure that we will talk about. And it's a pretty technical field, getting into shoe design.
Sure. And then you're messing with fashion too.
And
which
fashion.
Is subjective, right?
Of course. Well, because that's the other thing that I didn't address, is there are plenty of shoes out there that are very comfortable for women. And there are many shoes that are beautiful, but very few overlap. There's, like, the Venn diagram is like miles away. I mean, there's almost no overlap. And that's part of the other problem, is that you could be comfortable, but if you're in a professional setting, you also want to look great, and you're expected to look great, especially down in the South. it's a little different. Maybe you can wear sneakers if you're in Silicon Valley or if you're in a, fun startup. But for the most part, as you progress in your career, women need to dress more professionally. So do men. You start wearing blazers. You start wearing, fancier things. And I don't know. I just felt like women deserve more. And so off I went.
There you go. And, the irony of this is a different type of female doctor, one that might be a general practitioner, she's able to wear the comfortable shoes,
exactly.
right? Because they're wearing a white lab coat and probably some scrubs, right? So, the juxtaposition between one doctor being able to and one doctor not being able to is something to note.
Exactly, yeah. Clinicians, if you're in the OR, they're standing for 12 hours. Of course they're not going to be wearing a heel.
But so many other women are standing for 12 hours.
But so many are, exactly.
Right?
So why should we? Let's have some equity here.
Well, I'm glad we just walked through that, because what we just did is the topic of this episode, right? We have identified a need in the marketplace, right? And for this episode, what I would like to do is I'm really speaking to the person that is out there that has an idea and they just don't know if people want to buy it or not, right? So our goal today would be to help you figure out just some steps to go through to assess your own needs and assess what might be out there for you. Okay, so you founded Getaway Sticks. That is the name of the company that you produce the shoes underneath. Talk us through going from a bandsaw in your lab to thinking, you know what, dang it, I can do this.
We can do this.
And then actually doing it. How'd that happen?
It was not overnight. One of the things I talk a lot about that especially women want to hear about is, first of all, going from brains to shoes. How does that happen? And specifically how you move from two very disparate careers. And so in answer to your question and this one, I did them simultaneously for quite a while. So about a year and a half, I was a professor at Baylor, and I was starting Getaway Sticks. And as the classic scientist that I am, I believed I had a solution. I was working down the path of the solution. I was producing shoes, but it really wasn't until I was selling shoes for about a year that I felt like, okay, I've done something really great here. And it was after hundreds of customers came back to me and they wrote me and said, oh my gosh, Steffie, I'm so angry that this never existed before. This could have been a shoe I could have worn for my whole life, and now here it is, yay. And that over and over and over again, and I thought, okay, well look, you can't really do a startup part-time.
No.
That's a toughie.
It takes too much time and effort.
Too much. And at the time I was a professor, I was a startup CEO, I was also a mom of young children, a wife. I also had my own mental health and physical health to kind of, shepherd. And I had to put something down, so I decided I would put science down for a little while and try the startup business. And a year and a half later, I'm still doing it. So that's kind of how we rolled. Yeah.
So when you were, I'm going to steal a line from one of my mentors, but when you're looking to migrate from one thing to another, you want to make sure you pull the dock close enough to the boat.
Right.
Or pull the boat, sorry, reverse that. Pull the boat close enough to the dock so that when you do make the leap, you don't fall in the water.
Fair.
Right? So part of that is you had to make sure through proof of concept that there was a need for these out there. Right? And that, there's not you can't Google, hey, are people going to buy these? Right? You have to figure it out. So what were some of the steps you went for proof of concept, even very early on when you were doing prototypes of these and things like that? How did you figure out that, you knew that you were going to produce a good shoe that women were going to want to wear. How did you figure out that people were going to be receptive to that?
I think it's a little different in my case because if you ask any woman, hey, do you want a shoe that's more comfortable than the one you're wearing? Everyone will say yes.
Who says no?
Who's going to say no to that?
Right.
The difference is, in my case, the challenge was overcoming skepticism, and it still is. Overcoming skepticism that this shoe is any different than everything else out there that claims the things that all the big shoe companies claim, which is, this feels like you're walking on a cloud. It's your last heel you'll ever buy from 9 to wine. It'll blah, blah. All the heel companies claim comfort. And so if you ask a woman, would you like something more comfortable? They'll say, of course, yes. But how are you going to accomplish that, right? So So a large part of the challenge was literally getting the shoes on feet. And then for me, convincing myself that the customers weren't just kind of glad handling me, they were legitimately pleased with the product and willing to buy again. And so that, for me, required a couple of things. I was doing a lot of in-person markets, selling the shoes, so that I could literally be boots on the ground, fitting the women, finding out all those subtleties about facial expressions and do I like this or not? Is this really going to help me? And then is the price point right? There's just a lot of kind of quote unquote research I did at these markets in person as the founder. What are women liking? How do they feel when I ask them to put the shoe on and walk around the market? Do they come back and say, oh, it was okay? Or do they come back and say, well, how many other colors do you have? And it was the latter, fortunately, so that those repeated.
That must have been gratifying.
Yes, it was for sure. But as the native skeptic, as a scientist, I really had to do a lot of convincing of myself that was true. It's interesting you say that as well, because I had my husband has been a proponent of this idea very early on. In fact, he was more excited about it than I was at certain times when I was going through the development. Things are up and down, rocky. Oh, this isn't working. We got to try something else, blah, blah. And the reason he became such a proponent is that he was in the oil and gas industry, and he would go to these meetings with lots of women execs, and at the end of the meeting or when we're breaking for lunch, he'd say, hey, tell me about your shoes. And women would be like, excuse me, like what's going on here? But the women that he talked to were universally like, yes, let me know when they're done and I'll buy 12. And so he became a very early supporter of me because he did his own boots on the ground research. So I think it just kind of depends on where you're coming from and what that research looks like to convince yourself that, the boat is close enough to kind of jump. But in my case, I sort of had several boats lined up. And then once, I got pretty close, then I was willing to jump. I also, to be fair, I did have a backup career. I can always go back to neuroscience if I want to.
Sure.
In this case, I don't, and I really feel this is a very mission-driven thing for me. I never would have thought I would have become a neuroscientist and then a shoe designer.
It's a stretch, right?
It's a wild stretch. It's a vast leap. Like that boat is far from the dock.
Not many of your colleagues ventured this direction.
I think zero. I'd venture zero.
Fortune favors the bold.
Yeah, but I do it because it's such a needed product out there, and the women who love the shoe and wear the shoe and have found the shoe are brand ambassadors, just self-appointed. And they will report all these wonderful stories to me about how much the product has helped their lives. And that really is what keeps me going.
So tell me a little bit about, because I like to learn, without giving away anything proprietary.
Fair.
What have you done? What have you done to make this a shoe for the business professional out there that needs to walk, needs to stand, yet needs to look formal?
So for our landmark heel, which is what we have on the table, this is my original design that I came up with, 8 years ago. And we did a variety of things. So I kind of call it a Frankenstein shoe because I've taken all of the features of my favorite shoes and thrown them all together. The very most important thing is that the midsole is made out of our foam. We call it Rome foam, it's trademarked. So the whole wedge, that whole triangle shape, is 2 vertical inches of foam. So when you step down on it, that foam is absorbing shock just for the same reason it does in your athletic shoes. It's literally athletic foam in there.
Okay.
And then we've wrapped it with suede so that it matches the shoe and it continues to look formal. There are plenty of shoes out there that have like bright white, actually your sneakers in fact, the bright white foam, which gives you the cushion, but it reduces the formality of the shoe a little bit.
Certainly. There's places that I would wear this. For the listener at home, I'm wearing a sneaker that is leather on top, to look formal, yet it does have a sneaker on the bottom.
Which makes it comfortable and wonderful, but sometimes you need a little bit more elevated. So we wrapped it in suede. I gave us an ankle strap so that women can, it's almost like a lace for women. You can wear the shoe and just kind of walk or run. You don't have to clench your feet to keep yourself in the shoe, which is another factor of fatigue at the end of the day. Because I didn't like doing the buckle every time, I made it into a hook, so you can set the buckle one time and then just slide the hook in. Women love that feature. I made the vamp, which is the upper part around the toe. I made the line really nice and low and sexy, so you have a little bit of toe cleavage, but plenty of coverage for a formal setting. Mm-hmm. The outsole is made out of a rubber with a stamp in it, so that if you're on concrete and it's wet, you're not going to slip and slide all over the place. We put in a little metatarsal pad right under the toes, mm-hmm. so you have extra cushion under the toe. And then we added a couple of design elements that just make it a really sleek, a really classic design. This is not something that's going to go in or out of fashion. Mm-hmm. You can wear this with, almost anything, and it looks great.
Yeah, as much as fashion changes, a lot of it does stay the same, mm-hmm. right? Which is
good design is different from fashion. Right. And what we offer is design, not necessarily fashion. We mm-hmm. will definitely come out with colors that are kind of in the moment and fun, of course. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to pick up a shiny new shoe and a fun pattern, but really what we're offering is consistent design mm-hmm. and comfort.
See if you can give me an anecdote here.
Okay.
And we're going to tie this a little bit back to your previous career, because I've got a feeling that when you are more comfortable, there's less stress in your body. At the end of a long day, mm-hmm. mentally, you are in a much better place than you were. Let's say your feet are just killing you, your legs are cramping. You can't be in a great place if all that's happening. Okay.
Yeah.
So you said you've had a lot of great feedback. Mm-hmm. Let's share some feedback. So, is there somebody, and you don't have to say names, or you can omit that, but, let's share a success story.
One of my favorites, I have several favorites. One of them we just received the other day. Someone wrote in and said, I wore this shoe to a business trip, and I wore it into the Uber, to the airport, through the airport, on the plane, off the plane, meetings all night, dinner, hotel after. I was stuck with some colleagues that wanted to get a drink afterwards, wore my shoes the entire time, took them off at the end of what she said was a 12-hour day. And she said I put them right back on the next morning, and I felt just as good as if I had been walking barefoot or wearing, a Nike sneaker. And that's exactly what we want mm-hmm. for this. We want you to be able, and it doesn't matter if you're in business, we want you to be able, for example, for me at the time also, I was a young mom, so I needed to be able to go to work, and then at the end of the day, someone might call and say, oh, Steffi, the baby has a fever, could you pick up some Tylenol? If I was wearing any other shoe, I'd be like, well, no, I got to go home and get my flip-flops because I can't walk.
Right.
Just that short distance, or the time you spend circling to get a parking spot just so you can reduce the number of steps between you and the item you have to get, mm-hmm. right? Or, forget the grocery store at the end of the day. Immediately no. But those are the stories that women send me. They're like, yeah, can you believe it, Steffi? Like, I went to lunch with some friends and then I had to go to the grocery store, and I just went to the grocery store mm-hmm. in your shoes. And then I just left. And then I went home. And I didn't even think about it. I didn't mm-hmm. even think that I needed to change my footwear. And that's what we want. We want these shoes to just disappear. And I have many of those stories. They come in on the regular, and I love reading them. I like to write them on my wall sometimes. It keeps me focused.
Absolutely. You should always celebrate your successes, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that you've truly helped people and made a positive improvement on their life means that you did find a need to fill, and you filled it well. So that's awesome. That must feel fantastic. So.
It does feel good. It does feel good. It's definitely not without its challenges, but
anything worth doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Could be difficult.
For sure.
So, you're at a much different space than my field of financial mm-hmm. advisory. Mm-hmm. Yet, some of the similarities we can play on here is, you entered a very saturated market.
Yeah.
There's shoes everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? There's shoe stores on every other corner, if not every corner, right? And so you had to figure out a way to do it differently. You had to find an underserved area mm-hmm. and then go serve it. That's similar to what we do in the financial advisory world. There's a ton of financial advisors out there, and a lot of them do a great job. So to grow our businesses, we're looking for places that are underserved, and how do we go serve them? So somebody is listening to this episode. They're in the car watching on YouTube, and they have an idea for something, whatever widget that they want to produce and start a business on. Mm-hmm. Let's give them some advice and something that they can really take away from this episode as a point of action for them to go assess whatever market that they want to enter, right? Mm-hmm. How do you look at whatever space you want to go and see if there is a need? Are people going to buy this? And a lot of it you won't know, obviously, until you try it. Mm-hmm. And there's no magic bullet to avoid actually trying it. But there's you can give yourself some more educated guesses on what to do if you assess the marketplace. How would somebody go about that?
There are a lot of ways. I think the best way is to try to actually sell a product. Mm-hmm. One of the pieces of advice that I still remember is that there's a really big difference between asking someone if they would buy and asking them to buy.
That's wonderful.
And if I had this idea and I said, hey, would you buy a pair of shoes for this amount? Sure, absolutely, yeah, fine. Mm-hmm. But when it comes down to the rubber hitting the road and you have shoes on a table or whatever your product is, and you say, will you buy this? Whatever the price point for $9.99, there's whatever. If they will buy it, that's an indication that they are going to like it. And then the question is, are they going to be happy with it, and will they return it? There's a lot of cost to producing anything. So I think that in my situation, I'm talking about a produced good, which is different than in your industry a service, right? Mm-hmm. At the same time, though, you could do the same thing. Like, will you buy my service? Mm-hmm. And you can kind of use that as a pilot. I think that concept of building a prototype or starting from somewhere and just beginning is by far the hardest. It's the hardest because
starting is just hard.
It's just hard to start.
Right.
But I will say, one tip that I have used lately in the last year or so to start things that are hard is AI. You can use it for almost anything, but even in this case, you could use AI to write you a script that you could use to go sell the thing that you're interested in selling. And then you have somewhere to start. Then the real magic comes in listening and being quiet while your customer tells you, with words or body language or with their purchase behavior or their returning, what they think of it. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot that goes into that. But if you're just kind of quiet, they'll tell you. And then if you listen and say, oh, I didn't realize that was an issue for you. What if I did this? Would you like the product better if I did this? Or would you like the service better if I offered, instead of just regular doggy daycare, to come pick up the dog? Would that make a difference? Oh God, I'd pay whatever. Mm-hmm. I'd pay anything for that, right? Now you're getting into, I have this piece, but that's where I'm gonna really carve out my niche.
You found that need right there.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's it's uncanny how much this pops up on almost every single episode we do focusing around the business world. But listening to your customers, listening to your teammates, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. It is a constant theme that we see here on In the Green. But no, that's wonderful. It's just starting is difficult. I want to give anybody out there just the most encouragement possible, right? Try it. If it doesn't work, it's okay. Just get out there, get it done.
The number of serial entrepreneurs that I now know of is, it's amazing. Anyone who's started anything successful for the most part has failed like 2 or 3 times.
Yes.
And especially if they're men, they're like, that's cool. Yeah, I tried. I started it, didn't work out. And then I just tried again, tried something different. It's very different for women. Women take it much more personally for the vast majority. I'm talking in average.
Very generalization.
General.
Yeah.
I take it personally too. If someone doesn't like my shoes, I'm like, but why? Why, right? But you just got to do it. You got to get out there, say this is not a personal thing, it's a money thing, it's a product thing, and you start. It's the hardest thing.
Yeah, there's no replacement for just getting after it.
Yeah. And believing that you're the best person to bring the product to market as well, the product or the service, right?
Well, nobody else was doing this.
Correct.
Right? You were putting possibly across the entire world, you were putting more focus into making something like this and filling this need than anybody else.
True.
I mean, the rest of the world has had how much time to design this and nobody's done it yet?
I still don't understand. I mean, I keep waiting for these to be knocked off, to be honest. Sorry,
Right.
maybe I shouldn't say that. But I'm like
Edit that out, right?
but it seems, especially because it just seems like such a simple solution. However, that said, there's a lot of like finance and analyses that go into when you start something. How much can you afford to produce? How much time can you afford to spend on it? And the reason, realistically, why companies don't do this is because they work on a 3-month fashion cycle.
Mm-hmm.
They want a shoe to get on the floor and off the floor as quickly as possible.
Right.
And even though maybe companies have come up with this design, but realistically, what drives Cole Haan and all the big shoe companies to decide what gets produced is the finance department. And the finance department is usually mostly men. And they're looking at, this color red, that flies off the shelf. We're going to make that.
Yeah,
right?
sell red.
And there's very little wear testing, too, is the other thing. Like big companies, they might produce 100 shoes for a single season, and they're just looking at them. Like, that looks pretty. I like that. These will fit together in a collection, blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is the lowest. We want to sell that one, but it's too expensive, so we're going to reverse engineer it to be less expensive so we can sell it for this price, so we can put it on that shelf next to this shoe, and then it'll sell for that price. And then it's all rolled into a very carefully calculated model. And nowhere in there is research and design to figure out how to make it realistically easier for women. It's just how to get women to believe that it will be better. And that's the real frustration for myself and every woman out there. And the battle that we fight with online advertising is everybody else advertises that this is comfortable and different. How do I show you that ours really, truly is? And we still work on that every day.
I think you're going to be working on that for a long time,
For a long
right?
time,
I mean, it's
yeah.
there's no there's no quick solution to that one.
No, correct.
All right, so somebody has made it this deep in the episode, and they're like, man, I really want some of those shoes. Where should they go to get some of these shoes?
Well, we sell online at getawaysticks.com.
Okay.
And you can order. We are usually out the door the next day. You can usually have them 2 or 3 days later. We sell at a handful of stores, especially in Houston and on the East Coast. You can find a list on our website. But we offer complimentary returns and exchanges specifically for the fit issue. Every foot is different. I cannot promise that your size 7 is the same as my size 7. So, just order, try them on, and return if it doesn't fit. But that's the easiest and fastest way to get them. And then once you know your size, you can easily reorder. And so far, we're not discontinuing any of our styles. We're only adding. So we have a heel right now and a ballet flat. I call it the flattish because it's got a little bit of wedge.
Yeah,
you
got to have some technology in there, right?
Well, it's actually better for our feet. Walking on a completely flat surface is really tough.
Really?
On our feet. Yeah, it can cause fasciitis and other things. So we have our ballet flattish, and then later this year we're coming out with a slide and a boot and a sandal, and we're trying to basically broaden the line. And this goes also into financial analysis of you spend a lot of money to get a customer to your site or to your store. You want to give them a lot of options because you've invested a lot in that customer coming to your place of business, wherever.
And you finally have them.
And you finally have them, and you have their attention. And now I only have 2 styles to show them, and they're like, yeah, but I don't like those. And that's fair. I mean, I get it, right? So now I need to produce more styles at different price points for everybody's budget. And so that's, so we're doing that slowly and steadily. If I had, private equity money, I would do that a lot faster. But
right.
we're doing, we're sort of bootstrapping this so slowly and surely. And I think because of that also, it allows me to really hone in on the products that our customers really love.
Sure. Well, from what I can tell, obviously I'm not aware of heels myself. I'll give you a fun anecdote for the crowd.
We do go up to 11.5 if you want to try.
So I remember my sister is 7 years older than me, and she was getting ready for maybe freshman, like Sadie Hawkins dance or something like that.
Okay.
So I'm under the age of 10. And she's not liking her heels, complaining about how uncomfortable they are, ironically. And I'm like, well, it can't be that bad. So I decided to put one on, and I promptly rolled my ankle and fell into the wall. And that was the last time that I wore a pair of
Fell
heels.
into the wall.
Yeah. It was pretty emphatic. So.
I bet no woman here is surprised listening to this podcast.
Not at all.
Right?
My mom and sister were they were having a nice laugh, but
I bet.
I earned it. So.
Well, I mean, that's another that reminds me of formal events, right? The thing everyone knows, even men know, is that 10 minutes into a formal event, as soon as we're on the dance floor, heels are gone, right?
Yes.
Like one of the biggest party favors is like slippers or flip-flops so that women can take their heels off. I mean, there's a whole secondary industry that has erupted simply to counteract the damage that our shoes do. And we haven't even broached the subject of anatomical damage. I mean,
right.
Bunions, hammer toes, these require massive surgery to fix because our heels are not designed for our feet. I mean, it's honestly mind-blowing to me sometimes. But anyway, that's why I'm in business.
I am very glad there was A, space in the marketplace for you, and B, that you're taking it so seriously and really doing some good out there.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate
that's
that.
got to be gratifying to put your head down on the pillow at the end of the night knowing that you are making a difference out there in the world.
I am making a difference. I am making a difference. I am making a difference.
Super. Well, thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for coming by. It was a
Ryan.
pleasure to speak with you.
I appreciate it.
And thank you for sharing with the audience. Hopefully they learned something great today.
Of course. More shoes.
That's it.
Thanks for listening to our episode today. Make sure to like, share, and download our episodes wherever you get your podcasts, and we'd really appreciate a review. Hope to see you in the 19th hole.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized finance advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analysis of GFG Wealth Advisors. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, Private Client Services, or their clients or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by GFG Wealth Advisors or RFG Advisory or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives of Private Client Services, member FINRA, SIPC. Advisory services are offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Private Client Services, GFG Wealth Advisors, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.